Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gretchen and today I am here to review the latest book from Percival Everett, and that is James. And I am so excited to finally get to talk to you guys about this book. This was my most anticipated book of this year, and it's been getting a lot of buzz and floods of praise coming in my opinion, the hype is definitely real, and I am really looking forward to talking about this today. So for those of you that don't know anything about this book, it's in its simplest form. It's a retelling of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain from the perspective of Jim. Now, I personally first read both Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn when I was probably like 11 or 12. It was around that time. And when I knew that this book was coming out, I just so happened to decide to reread both of them again last year as an adult. And as a kid, I really enjoyed the adventurous nature of the story, but a lot of the deeper meaning that Twain was trying to get across in that book, it was obviously lost on me for reading those books at such a young age. So revisiting these books as an adult was a completely different experience for me. One of my favorite types of books are ones that include satire, and Mark Twain is obviously one of the pioneers of this type of book. And Percival Everett, who in my personal humble opinion is an American treasure and is my favorite modern satirical writer, I knew going into this book that it was going to be something special. Now, because this book is a retelling, a lot of people ask whether or not you have to have read Tom Sawyer or Huck Finn to be able to enjoy this book. And I say that you could get away without reading them, but obviously your reading experience is going to be enhanced if you have read the previous two books. So I do understand that sometimes you don't want to go back and read them, you just want to read what is here. I would also say that there are several great summaries of both of those books that are out there. I know specifically there is a website for Spark Notes, and they are usually pretty good about giving detailed summaries or synopses of books, and I know that those are classic books, so they would definitely be included in there. But you know, you're kind of probably spoiled for choice when you go out to look for summaries of those books, because they are beloved classics and they have been around for a very long time and they've been well studied. So there's lots of summaries out there if you just want to go that route, if you're not really familiar with too much of the background stories that mirror what is going on in James. Now, what I will also say is that the main thing that I think that you need to go into this book knowing is, and I think that this is kind of like, without giving too much spoilers away of what the story was if you're not really familiar with it, I think that going into this book knowing that the bottom line is that Huck was born into and raised in a very racist environment and was taught to believe that Black people, especially slaves, were lazy and stupid, and basically showing them any type of humanity or treating them with any type of respect or kindness was basically frowned upon, and it was a one-way ticket to hell, basically. And obviously the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is told from Huck's perspective, and really what we learn in that story is that Huck has a very abusive father, and he decides that in order to escape his father and get away from the pain and suffering that he's going through, he decides to fake his own death, and he runs away from his father. And after he has run away, he basically stumbles upon Jim, who is a slave that has escaped as well from his current situation, and he is fleeing because he caught wind that his current owner is thinking of selling him to a different plantation, and he knows that by going to that plantation his circumstances will be much worse, and also he is going to lose or be separated from his wife and children, and he, flees in order to figure out kind of what his next steps are in order to prevent all of those things from happening. So with James being from Jim's perspective, even though we get the same basic story, there are some omissions, there are some liberties that Everett takes as well. We get a whole new narrative, and Everett kind of fills in all of those gray areas, and that is where Everett's satire shines. And one of my favorite parts of this book is how Everett handles the obvious lie and myth that blacks are unintelligent and they're dumb. And he shares with the reader that it's basically an act that they're putting on for white folks, and it's purposefully done, and they are purposely acting dumb to please the white people, to make them feel superior and basically avoid conflict, because the dumber they seem, the more superior whites feel, and they kind of feel like they have one up on them, when in reality the slaves are way more intelligent than all of these idiotic white men that are basically running the place throughout the duration of the book. And there is this brilliant scene at the beginning, or very close to the beginning, where Jim is teaching, he's basically teaching a class to these clearly clever young black children on how to play dumb around the white folks. And it is one of not only the funniest scenes in the book, but it is one of the funniest scenes that I have read in a book for a really long time. And as a matter of fact, I was reading this in a coffee shop, and when I got to that part, I was literally chuckling and laughing to myself. I looked probably like a damn fool because I was sitting at this table alone with this book, and I was just giggling so hard because it was so sharp and it was so funny, and I was definitely getting weird looks from people, but I didn't care. I was enjoying so much of that narrative. And the other part of that experience for me was, for as funny as that scene was, it was equally sad for me as well. And it started to make me think about how often this probably still happens in real life today. Now, obviously, not to the extreme of taking children and sitting them in like a makeshift classroom and having lessons about how to play dumb for the white folks, but it made me think about how often Black parents are sitting their children down and having similar type conversations with them about how to act and behave certain ways in order to help them thrive in a world that very much still has that ridiculous notion and that seated notion that whites are better. And Everett just exuded the humor and intelligence, confidence, eloquence, pride, and grace that threatens all of those people that think that way and cannot perform at the level of a Black man like Everett does. And he didn't do it in a punitive way. It's not Everett saying that he is better than anyone else. It's basically him saying that he is an equal and he has earned people's respect and he deserves that respect. And Everett writes racial satire in a way like no other author I have ever come across. And although I love The Trees and Erasure, this book hit very differently for me. I felt that this book, Everett took it to an extra level of care and added an extra level of respect to it as well. And this book made me think the entire time I was reading it. It just wasn't a source of entertainment. My brain was reeling the whole time as I was enjoying this book, and it forced me to look at the world in a different way. And this book just wasn't a retelling of Huckleberry Finn from Jim's perspective. It was almost a retelling of the current world from or through the eyes of Percival Everett. And it just reaffirmed that these injustices are still real, and although there has been progress made, they still exist, and there certainly hasn't been enough progress made with it. And I think one of the other things that really struck me about this book was not only did I find it to be very humorous, I also felt this book to be full of heart and hope. And it also showed me that there is a capacity for people to change, and there is always, always hope that things can get better and that we can progress and we can move on. I just loved this book so much. I honestly don't think that there's going to be another book this year that is going to knock this off of the top of my list. I just think that this book is a masterpiece. It's brilliant. It is definitely going on my list of favorites of all time. I don't think that I've ever really officially compiled like my top 5 or my top 10 favorite books of all time, but I could confidently say that this book would comfortably be on each of those lists. And I am just still in awe of Percival Everett and his capacity to write as brilliantly as he does. So very much looking forward to his next book. If you have read this book, let me know what your thoughts are on it. And until we read again, bye.